How are you, everyone? My name is Tae Nam. I'm working for Sungkyunkwan University in Korea. Welcome to the first module titled Data Revolution and the Changing Roles of Government. This module aims to help understand the current trend, big data revolution, and data-driven government, and the changing roles of government. The scope of data that government needs to deal with has expanded so far. Additional sources of data change the traditional roles of government. So this first module contributes to understanding its changing roles in the age of data revolution. We have four objectives from this first module. The first objective is you need to understand data revolution. And second objective is understanding the new data sources. And third, understanding the changing roles of government. The final objective of this module is understanding data value. So in alignment with these objectives, this module has structures like this. So we will cover data revolution and data explosion, and what is the new data sources. These data new sources will be the big data. So this is a very important part. And the third one is changing roles of a government with this big data age. And first, how can we harness data value, especially in the public sector and government side? As we know, annually, the size of the global data sphere is expanding. It's almost exponentially increased since 2020, especially. Data revolution, we can have some numbers. This is just for your information. Yeah. Please read it. Big data revolution can be explained in three ways. The first one is we have new data sets. For example, Internet of Things, satellite data, smartphones, social media. All these things create new data sources. So when you make a phone call to your friends, that is also data. And you can make records to the Facebook account. That is also data. And sensors, Internet of Things, will make the data too. These are all new data sets. And the second thing is methods of analysis. For example, we can use artificial intelligence, so-called machine learning and deep learning. These are also methods of analysis. And also, finally, computing. Computing power is change. For example, parallel and distributed cheap memory cloud computing is one driving force of computing power change for big data revolution. So big data can be defined a combination of technology and data that integrates reports and accesses all available data filtering, reporting, and correlating insights achievable with previous data technologies, data processing surpassing the human scale. So this is a kind of comprehensive definition of the big data. So big data is not only data itself, but also much more than that. Methods and computing power and how to use and how to harness that value from the big data, that is also related to the big data concept. There are three trends that enable the big data revolution. First one is rapidly increasing the amount of data available. And second trend is accelerating data storage capacity and computing power at lower cost. And third, evolution in machine learning approach to analyze convoluted data sets. Interestingly, 90% of total data around the globe has been created alone in the past 2 years, which means this increase is exponential. Big data has originally the five V's or 4 V's. That is the typical characteristic of big data previously. But now some people say 8V. Virality, viscosity, does it stick with you? Here, does the data stick with you? That's the viscosity. And velocity. Velocity is kind of speed. And variety. Very different kinds of data. And volume. The size and the scope of the data. And the value. What kind of value can you extract from the big data? And veracity. It kind of trustfulness. Information or disinformation. And also, now this concept is also prevailing. Visualization. How can we visualize the big data and big data insights? Data revolution, this term is not my own term actually. Earlier, 2015, after the 2015 Millennium Development Goals, MDG, the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Mr. Ban, he said, firstly, he expressed the high-level panel, the data revolution, to advise on the global development agenda. So this concept is better data and statistics will help governments track progress and make sure their decisions are evidence-based. And also, these things also strengthen accountability. This is not just about governments. International agencies and private sectors should be involved. A true data revolution would draw on existing and new sources of data to fully integrate statistics into decision-making and promote open access to and use of the data and ensure increased support of the statistical systems. So, data revolution is transformative actions needed to respond to demands of a complex development agenda and improvements in how data is produced and used, and closing data gaps to prevent discrimination, and building capacity and data literacy in small data, and big data analytics. What else? Some more examples are understanding modernizing systems of data collection, and liberating data to promote transparency and accountability, and developing new targets and indicators. These are examples of data revolution now. For more information of data revolution, for an event or movement to be revolutionary, or as opposed to evolutionary, that is a revolutionary concept, what has been sufficiently disruptive or transformational to deserve being called revolutionary? Is the emergence of a big data sufficiently transformational to qualify as a revolution? Is the open data movement disruptive enough? All these questions are related to data revolution. These are all very big questions and very important questions to explain the data revolution. Is the data revolution about new partnerships between national statistical offices and civil society or citizen science? And multiple data revolutions, for example, data privacy revolution, open data revolution, big data revolution, and the social data revolution. Some people call this is very much Copernican shift, very fundamental change in discovery and decision-making poses profound questions for us all. We need to improve existing data processes. What can be existing data processes? As we know very well, survey methodology. And second thing is mobile data. For example, we used mobile phones, smartphones, and tablets. That is mobile data collection. And third one is administrative data. Government operates. The private sector organization operates. Public agencies operate. These kind of operational data are accumulated as an administrative data. This is also a source of open data too. And data dissemination. Coherent dissemination using new technologies and innovative tools to adapt to the user needs. We have new data sources. Think about today, sensors, Internet of Things, geospatial data. When you use the Google Maps, that is also geospatial data. And that data is based on sensors and satellite imagery data. And as we know very well, telecommunication data, smartphone data, call data. And third one is commercial transactions. For example, credit card data. When you use credit card, when you make a payment by credit card, that is also recorded as a data. And also barcode data and scanning data and QR code data. That is the commercial transaction data. And web crawling. You know, the internet is the ocean of big data. You can crawl web data. Web crawling data is also new data sources. And when you use Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you can create the data. That is social media data. So all of these things are 5 very popular data sources, new data sources. Adoption of big data by industry. What is government here? Absolutely, telecommunication, insurance, advertising company, financial services, healthcare, and technology companies are very open and very frequently use the big data. But government, especially federal government, state government, local government, is not so much compared to other sections, other industries. For example, the United States data is really explosion in the public sector. For example, Department of Energy and Geological Survey and NASA, National Cancer Institute. This is just an example. So just name it. Any public agency, they are now increasingly use the data, so-called big data, in their domain, policy domain. The government roles are changing now with the new data sources. For example, these are kind of characteristic how government role is changing now. The first one is the businesses of government organization. So government businesses, government operations, what they work is now changing with new data sources. And second thing, building regional centers of support. And third one, there will be new forms of partnerships, public and private partnership and public-private and also civic organization. Those partnerships has newly formed. And leading by example. We need to make a kind of benchmarking case or a good exemplar cases. And then are the organizations, are the unit of work, they can follow that kind of exemplar cases. And skill sets, government employees' skill sets are now changing. And blended approach to compiling official statistics. So previously, before the big data, people think about official statistics. Statistics are authorized concept, but now big data is not authorized concept. So how can you replace the big statistical data with big data? We need to have a blended approach. And finally, legal framework and protocols. So we will explore these kind of changing roles of government with new data sources. The first one, the businesses of government organization is now changing. How? The changing business model for the government and other data producing agencies. And many government agencies will be less vertically integrated and outsource more of their statistical processes. And the change in government roles from ownership over their statistical production to ownership of management challenges to assess risk and cost. This is the way of the changing in government roles. And second thing, changing skills profiles. So government employee skill sets are now different requirements. Government staff needs to have a proper command of new methodologies to identify, evaluate, and assess new data sources. And this requires skills and training capacity in the emerging field of data science. Building regional centers of support. In terms of statistical office or statistical agencies, national statistical agencies do not have the capacity and resource to adapt. So the government should account for their coordinated approach in bridging the data revolution to the national statistics. This is kind of the way of decentralization, maybe. So we need to have regional centers of excellence and knowledge. This is just the same to the big data centers and platforms in regional side. And blended approach for compiling official statistics. So there is an importance of blended and complementary approach for compiling traditional official statistics. There is a degree of statistical generalizability of many non-traditional data sources is presently not well understood. So we need to employ with caution, and traditional sources should be used to validate and calibrate these estimators, especially in the short term. So we need to have a blended, complementary approach between traditional statistical data and the big data, also new sources of data. And we will have to have new forms of partnerships. This is very important. Access to new data sources requires new forms of partnership. So data sources are different. So we need to have different styles and different forms of partnerships. Recent emergence of successful cooperative structures, which often link different actors within the private sector, facilitating access to large multilateral cooperations, reducing coordination costs. So there is a possibility for a closer cooperation between the National Statistical Agency for the countries, developing countries and also developed countries. And we will have legal framework and protocols. The success of a data partnership depends on the systematic and transparent and protocol-based approaches. There will be legal framework. And those protocols are already in place for sensitive medical data and essential in order to create trust in the reliability and integrity of the national data systems when dealing with non-volunteer data. We need to have legal framework and official authorized protocols to manage the new source of data. And leading by example. This is very important for practice. For example, the lead agency in charge of formulating and implementing a country's data revolution, that agency's role is very important. And this agency plays an important role by setting a good example for how new data sources for official statistics can be used by striving to experiment with new data sources. How can we harness data value from data management? Important direction is we need to close the gap between consumer experience and citizen experience. For example, consumer experience is very insightful and very practical, and we can experience very well consumer side. Private sector's companies, think about Amazon.com, eBay. Their services are improved, rapidly improved, innovative. But what about citizen side? What about the services provided by the government? Public services. Citizen experience is really improved very fast compared to consumer experience? We cannot say that. So closing the gap is a very important direction. And the rise of technology is creating an enhanced customer experience in the private sector that raises expectations when the citizen is engaged by the government. To harness the data value, we need to ask these fundamental questions. Okay, we have data, and we use the data. What happened? What did it happen? What will happen? And what should we do? These are 4 very important questions. We need to answer those questions. Government can take major steps to become data-driven by focusing their strategy primarily these 2 areas. First one, leveraging existing data. So some people can think existing data is not important. New data sources are important. No. Existing data deserve leverage. So we need to leverage existing data sets. That is also important. And also creating data sharing networks. Sometimes public-private partnerships or intergovernmental relationships. Anyway, data sharing networks. These are very important. We need to integrate data, and we need to create new value from integrating different data sets. And that is the way of creating new insights from the data. Okay, I'd like to summarize the first module. Data revolution. The rapidly increasing amount of available data. Simply saying, this is the data revolution. And data revolution accelerates data storage capacity and computing power at a lower cost. And this is an evolution in machine learning approach to analyze convoluted data sets. And given the data revolution, the government roles are changing. For example, organizational change, such as new business model and less vertical integration. And HR, human resource also change. We need to have new skill sets of employee side. And training capacity is different now. And cross-organizational concept, cross-organizational relationships, such as partnerships, data-based and data-centered partnerships across agencies and across sectors. And we need to harness data value. We need to extract public values from the big data use. Okay, this is the end. Thank you for your attention, and we'll see you in the next module. Thank you. Bye.